what we're going to go over is a thing called Cypress. And so what Cypress is an end-to-end testing framework. It's like another replacement for Protractor or Selenium. It's open source. There's some paid ones. And for those of you who are new to these talks, my name is Lee Blazik. I live in Denver, Colorado, but I've been doing a few talks lately and now working with Tom. Like we have Sylvia on the line who's come to a few, and she's from Portugal. We've had some overseas people. We're not sure everyone else is. This is open to anyone and it's free. But yeah, and so my name's Lee again, and so today here's like a summary of what we're gonna go over, hopefully in half an hour, 45 minutes, and maybe some questions and answers at the end for 10 or 15. So we'll do about me. We'll do a like 2-sentence quick, who is everyone, or a little bit of background. We'll go over what end-to-end testing is in general, because with some people I found come from a variety of backgrounds, maybe you're server side or a front-end developer, and there can be a blur of terms of end-to-end or like front-end. So we'll just define at least what I mean when I say end-to-end, because other people may mean different things, and that's okay, but I just thought I'd set the context. And then we'll go over what is Cypress, what browsers it supports, what you can replace, how you can use it, basic usage, alternative, gotchas, future features, and a bunch of demos of some things and how you can use it. So that's what we're gonna go over today. And about me, I just tend to refer to myself, and most of the positions I've had are either like architect or subject matter expert in the language of JavaScript. I work full stack, but I don't do full stack with PHP or C# or Java. Those are all fine tools. I just don't know them. There's plenty of experts at those. But because I've actually been working full stack JavaScript, meaning Node.js and Express or Nest or Strong Loop, etc., on the server side, so I've just the term SME of JavaScript, which tends to more clarify like, yeah, I'm full stack, but I don't know much PHP, etc. But I've done Angular, Node, front-end, APIs. I've actually done a little bit of native iOS programming too, but that's been a long time ago. I've been developing since 2003, 15 or 17 years. Either way is fine. And I started in JavaScript, the full stack, in about 2013 when it was Angular version 0.8 and Node 0. Whatever. So that's just how long I've been laser focused on the full stack JavaScript side of things. And how about let's hear a quick we already heard about Tom. What about Sylvia? You want to give us 2 sentences about you, and then maybe Manjeet or Bobby, if you guys want to say where you're from and just what your role is, or if you want to skip, it's okay.
Well, since I'm here, I'm gonna start. So I've been working in full stack development since 2015. Right now I'm in a project where I use Vue.js and PHP, but it's like 90% front end and 10% back end. I love to code, and I want to learn more about all that's related to front end. So I'm from Portugal, Lisbon, and that's it.
Great, yeah. Thanks, Sylvia. How about, looks like next on the list is Manjeet.
Hi, everyone. My name is Manjeet. I'm from UK. I live in Southampton, England. I'm a test automation engineer, 4 years of Protector with the JavaScript. My main interest is to get into Cypress with the TypeScript and Cucumber PDD.
Oh, great, cool. That's excellent to get a full test engineer too. That's awesome. Yeah. And I've spent 5 years with Protractor too, so I know all about Protractor, and you'll find this is way better.
Yeah, this is much better, much better than Protector. Protector is you get the flaky test.
Yep.
They break so many times because of the latency, and the Protector is very hard to write test cases compared to Cypress is very easy.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just shorter and easier. Protractor was great for its time, but
yeah, time is gone now. So
yeah, and I see we have a Bobby and a Jeff that are new to us. Would you guys want to say anything, or if you don't, that's okay too. Just 1 or 2 sentences so we know where everyone's from, because I can also tailor to different people's experiences too.
Sorry I'm late. I hope I didn't miss much.
No, no.
Rails, React, developer. We do TDD using RSpec and Jest for React, I believe. So I'm wanting to learn more. That's it. Thank you.
Oh, great, cool. Well, and Jeff, where are you from? America, Canada, somewhere?
I've been in Denver for 20 years. Our small 35 member company is distributed throughout the United States.
Oh, great, cool. Yeah, I'm in Golden outside Denver. Tom's from Boulder, so we're nearby. Great. And then Bobby, what about you? If you care, if you don't want to, that's okay too. Sounds like Bobby's just keep. Oh.
He's on mute.
Oh yeah, Bobby. If you did want to say something, you're on mute. If you just choose to be quiet, that's okay. We can just move on. Okay. We'll just figure he's quiet or just maybe has a mic issue. So on with that, and then so at least the term I'm referring to end-to-end testing because there can be many ends of different parts. I'm referring to websites in the browser, meaning like you're in Chrome or Firefox or Edge or Safari, and you're like a user's manually typing or clicking through a website and have that go all the way through to your API calls, to your databases, and to third-party services or whatever, like literally running in the browser and then checking things in the browser itself as opposed to making an API call and then checking it or running again that, or unit tests. Like this is not referring to unit testing where you just run a chunk of code. That's like what Jest is for, or JUnit, or any of those other things, which can be done server-side and front-end, but they still just run a unit of code. They don't actually simulate a user's clicks and actually open the browser itself. So that's what I'm referring to by end-to-end testing. You know, and you can do these with, sure.
Can I interrupt you? Are you recording this, please?
Yes, I am recording it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, and then you can, and now with Cypress, it's very easy to mock. Say you're doing Angular or React or Vue or React or these things. You can mock the API calls too. So maybe if you work for a larger company, your APIs aren't that stable, you can still at least get some sanity and mock your API calls if you desire. So that's one nice feature. So, and here, even before we get into Cypress, I wrote a little of this because this can apply, if people are new to end-to-end testing, it can apply to Protractor, it can apply to any of these things. A common thing is, since unit testing got popular, is when people started to do a lot more end-to-end tests, they would reload the page every time before every test. And while that can be done, and I see why you do that in a unit test, remember, unit tests are way faster. You know, if you're even loading a well-done Angular app or React app, it can still take anything from 2 to 10 or even more seconds to do an initial page load. And then after that, all of your page loads may only be a second or two. So what I've seen a lot, and if anyone's worked anywhere where you're running your end-to-end test and it takes like 3 hours, usually the first thing I do is look at those and go, oh, yep, we're loading the page entirely before every test, which seems like a good idea, but that can take your 3-hour test run and cut it down to 45 minutes. So although you can do it either way, I've seen a stronger push for that lately to do it. But if you want to save time and your tests are taking a long time and you're actually running them on a deployed site, you know, not reloading your page, a full page refresh for every test can really help you out. And for example, if you have to load a page and then you have to log in and then go to a certain section, that can take a minute or two. And if you do that 100 times, I've had projects where I've had 1,000 of these tests. You're talking a 4-hour test run, and you can cut that down to 45 with the same exact results, and in fact, better, more reliable results. Because if a thing takes 4 hours run, maybe it redeploys in there anyways. So that's just a little note, and that works for Protractor, that works for Cypress, or any of these other ones. Also, interestingly, I discovered it in Protractor, and it's still somewhat true in Cypress, is that there was a push for a while to abstract like your selectors. And by a selector, I mean a CSS selector. Like say you're selecting an input field in a form, And instead of just writing, say you need to type into that, you need to do 5 tests, and you need to type into that selector, a lot of good programming practices would be to remove that, make it a variable, and abstract it out in some other file. Now, strangely, with Protractor Selenium, it was really bad. If they called it like helper files or selector files, it caused a lot of instability as opposed to just writing like ID form 1, input class this, each of those 5 things. It improved stability of the test and consistent results. And Cypress is a lot better, but still I have noticed that. So that's, I don't know if anyone's come across that. If you have 20 tests, you don't really see these things, but when you get in the hundreds or the thousands, you do. And then next, remember your tests themselves, they're not production code. So even when you write a test in Cypress, that code's not actually running and it's not actually shipped anywhere. It's not your real application. I've seen a lot of companies waste a lot of time like trying to turn their Cypress tests into TypeScript and do all this type checking, and it can be done, but it doesn't actually, it takes a lot more time and causes a lot more issues, and you have a lot more just fickle errors. So what I found when you're doing end-to-end tests, just write the test and who cares? It'll save you a lot of time in the long run. And again, you don't have to do that, but there's a lot of places that are really pushing for TypeScript everything lately. And Cypress, you're basically just writing, all you're doing is writing a list of commands for the browser to run. And even TypeScript itself doesn't actually run in the browser. It all gets converted to JavaScript anyway. So just, you can be really particular about the code and typing your tests, but in these ones, it basically makes no difference and it takes a lot more time, and using TypeScript, especially in these files, can cause you a lot more inconsistencies and errors. Just throw it out there. So keep it simple and straightforward. And also, if you're looking to speed up your tests, one thing that can be a key sign is that if you have a really slow app, your tests are also going to be really slow. So at one place I worked called Dish Networks, it was a super slow app, and there was all these complaints, we need the tests to run faster. And I wrote all the tests from scratch when I got there. And I wrote them as fast as I could, but then it was, the only way to speed up was we got to speed up the load time of the app, and there was like it took 10 seconds to switch between pages. It wasn't, the app was pre-existing. So that was one thing. You can also remember, if you want these to speed up, you can also increase the performance of your app itself, because you're literally running and loading your whole app or your API calls. So that's that. So previously, before Cypress, one huge difference between Cypress and everything else, between Protractor, Nightmare, Nightwatch, Protractor was written in JavaScript, but underneath it ran on Selenium. And that was the same with Nightmare and the same with Nightwatch. These are other options to do this sort of thing. I've used all of them. Protractor the most before Cypress, but they all ran on Selenium, and Selenium had issues. So there's all these issues, but basically it was all Selenium underneath. The other thing was just syntax to tell Selenium what to do. And then someone mentioned RSpec. We also, where I worked at Dish before we switched to, we had RSpec, and the tests just weren't reliable. Like 70% of the time, they weren't producing accurate results. Capybara was another thing. And those are all Ruby on top of Selenium. So that's one huge difference between Cypress and all the others, is that it does not run on Selenium. It literally tells Chrome what to do directly. And just this year, until this year, they didn't support any other browser except for Chrome or Electron, but now they do support Firefox and Edge in beta, which has recently happened. So here's all the different things you can test eventually. Great. Now probably what I'll do here is I'd like to show everyone this little video. It does a good intro. We can just watch this.
There's no audio with this, correct?
Oh, there's no audio. Okay, well, everyone just watch this for a good overview. And then I do have a link to the slides, and you can watch all this.
Can you talk us through it?
Well, sure. What we're looking at here is this is the GUI for Cypress. One thing that's different from Cypress and RSpec or Nightmare Nightwatch, you never had a GUI like this. And what you're looking at on the left-hand side is a list and output of your tests. And then when they're done, you can actually click back and go back in time to see which and where it failed. And on the right-hand side, you're just actually looking at the website that it's actually testing. And I'm going to open up and do all this also. Oops, sorry, oops, hang on, sorry, oops.
That was pretty sweet looking.
Yeah, and don't worry, we're gonna spend a lot. I'm gonna open this up and do all this for you. Great. So sorry that I didn't realize the sound didn't come through.
Oh, it's probably a Zoom thing.
Yeah.
Lots of little bugs.
Or something I need to learn about Zoom. But what is, I just want to make sure, sometimes when you do live things, stuff crashes. I should have everything running, but just in case, that was the GUI for Cypress. And that's not where you write your tests, but that's where you run them and you can see what's happening and see what's going on. Because that was one of the hugest problems with Protractor, is that you get a failure and you can't actually watch what's happening half the time. You need to go back to videos and screenshots and guess. Well, actually, sorry, it could open it. It's been a few years since I've used it, but you couldn't step back in time. You just watch it happen and then it was over. But here's a nice schematic overview of some of the other things that you used to have to do. Protractor is the best contrast. Like, even with Protractor, you got to choose, like, are you going to test it with Jasmine or QUnit or Karma? And it has to run on Selenium, and you have to update that. It depends on the browser. And then you have to choose an assertion library, try or expect, and then you maybe throw on sign-on, or you had to cobble all these 10 things together to just before you can even write a test and get it to run. And then, especially with anything JavaScript, the versions change every 6 months, and then you might have everything working fine, and then Selenium updates, but then Protractor doesn't update, and then you've got to do this back hashing, and then Chai updates, but then Protractor doesn't work with it. There's all this versioning issues to just keep it running. So with Cypress, you install Cypress, and that's it. That's all you need. You can add a few reporter things, but you can get up and running, you install Cypress in your project, and that's it. And you update Cypress. You don't update 10 other things. So that's one of the biggest advantages before you even get to writing tests on Cypress, which I think is amazing. You just install it and you can write tests and get it to run. Some of the other things you can get that aren't, if you're used to using RSpec or Protractor, you have to have sleep everywhere to wait for the page to load. You can force waits or sleeps in Cypress, but generally you don't need them. Like 90% of the time you used to have these and you just get rid of them. And it just automatically waits. You can set a default timeout, but it'll automatically wait for your page transition or your load. It just knows, because it's talking directly to Chrome and getting feedback from Chrome or the browser. It's not going through JavaScript, which is compiled and then into Selenium or some other thing. And there's no more Selenium. Here we talked about the GUI. When you run these tests, which we'll step through in a second, you can run a bunch, and if one failed, you can actually go back and you can see the steps leading up to it, because sometimes with end-to-end tests, the test that fails might be actually checking something that's correct, but it's something that happened before, and like data entry or something else, maybe didn't get entered right, or maybe a button was missing to get to a view. You can check what happened before then. You can very easily stub requests. By stub, I mean, especially in the Angular and React app, you need to make API calls or GraphQL, and those depend on a live server. And maybe you do want to test that, but maybe in some cases, you want to separate your concerns from the UI to your API, and you can run off stubs also. So you could essentially have two different sets of sets. You could run off live data or databases and servers, or you can entirely stub it, and that way at least you know, well, your API is working in a way you know, and something's wrong with the API. There is a CLI you can use to do this headlessly. We'll go through that. It has built-in screenshotting and videos, again, which Protractor didn't have. You had to do all sorts of monkey business to do that. And then, hang on, sorry. And then it also has, I haven't used these in a year, but it used to have Docker images where if, you know, to set up all these things, you still need like to run headless on like an AWS thing, you need XVFB and some of these other things to simulate a monitor. So it would have Docker images. You can just pull it and go here and run it, which is just brilliant. And like the current browser versions, all built in that Docker image. So really good. Let's see. So here's like a basic test. And in fact, before I do that, let me switch out of here, and I'll show you what there's this project. I put the link up. Cypress has a default kitchen sink project with basically, I think it's 90% of the things you can do. That's called the Cypress example kitchen sink. And I forked it, and this link I put out is my fork, because what I want to do is show you how you can modify it and run it in CI. And I've got even a branch on a pull request on my own thing. And you can see some of the feedback you can get like from your checks. You can have GitHub checks. And you can go in here, and I've used Circle CI for this, but just to show you some of the things I was making a bunch of changes minutes ago, but it looks like maybe I broke something. But you can see, but show you can run it. You know, maybe they don't all pass. But so that's what that project is. And then this is actually that thing running. So here it is locally. I have the project is two things. It's just a simple HTML site and JavaScript, and then it's a bunch of tests that run on it. So you can see this is like the basic page, and like here you want to go look at traversal, and it even tells you in this site what these tests are doing, and then you run the test on that to make sure it works. It's a pretty handy thing. Then what I also did to show you another cool thing is that I took that and I deployed that exact same site on Heroku, and I think I put this link out there. So I was going to show you a bunch of tests run on me locally, and then I'm going to change the URL and run those same tests, the exact same tests on this remote one, just by changing the URL, and you can see a contrast. So let's see that. Now, if everyone's slightly familiar with Node apps, I'm not going to do the install. Just if Manjit or someone had trouble, we can try and help with that afterwards. So right here, I just have npm start running. So this is just that website running. This isn't the test on 8080, and that's right here. Now down here in a separate window, this command npm run cy open, it's in that package. And what that's doing is it's just typing Cypress open, which is opening the GUI, and then we can choose to run the tests. So I'll do this, and then we're gonna see Cypress open any second now. Where did it go? Come on. Here it is. Sometimes it takes a while. And so I did slightly modify the project from Cypress because it didn't have the ability to point it at different URLs in the example anyways. And I wanted it to run on, it had a whole bunch of automated code checking things, which if you had your own login for like Testum Audio, which does code quality, I just removed all that because I didn't want to set up another account for that. But so you can see here, this is like the start window. And here this is all the files in the example folder. I'll go through that later. And then here's where you choose which browser you're running, Firefox or Electron. And to do Edge, I haven't actually run that. It's very recent, but you need Windows. I don't have Windows. But here I could click this button and literally run all the specs. But I'm not going to do that. I'll just start with one to make it simpler and faster. And it just opened in my other screen. Hang on. So this is what we saw in that video. So over here on the left-hand side, you can see it's loading a bunch of tests. And then this window where my mouse is moving, this is that website locally. You can see, oh, it's actually running. I forgot, I have it set. It's running on the remote first. There you go. I just have to change that in the file. But it's going through all these tests, right? And so when this is done, then I'll switch the URL and we'll do it locally just so you can see how you can do both. And what this is doing, each of these little things with a check is a test, like an it statement. If you've used Mocha for JavaScript testing, it literally, they have some weird mirror report of Mocha. I forget exactly what it is, but if you can write Mocha, you figure this out, and it's really straightforward and simple. So you can see it going through and checking all these things. You can see it toggling the selector buttons on the right-hand side. And you can see another thing with this one, in their examples, they do it, they reload the page every time. And if you're running locally, it doesn't make a difference, but you can see how we're adding, at the start of each test, we have this blank screen for a second or two. That's because it's loading the site that's deployed. So here's this page of it. And let's go into, say one of these fails, we want to go back in time. These are literally all the steps in this test. You can see visit this URL. Then we want to get, if you see I'm hovering over this get action email, this get by class, and it's nice, it shows you, it's highlighted over here for you. And then, but say you want to go to, like, maybe it failed here, you can go, and this is what it looked like at that time. Or if you want to go to this test, you can see what it looked like going back in time. And if you have issues with your tests, this really helps. And then another thing that really helps that Protractor, nothing else has, is you can still use the normal Chrome inspector in here. Let's say I hit rerun here, it'll do a bunch of stuff for us. It shouldn't here, sorry, they might have changed that. There's a recent update. Let's let it run again.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
Well, first a comment. This is kind of a complicated website to be testing. I mean, you're testing Cypress.io, right?
No, I'm not testing Cypress. See the URL infinite depths right here?
Oh, okay. So yeah, it's like a bunch of calls, like programming calls, right?
So what do you mean
it'd be nice to see like a login page, just a simple login and a password, something like that.
Well, sure, I can go to that. Well, but the thing, this project, it's an HTML site. So in here, we did do that, but basically login, you're typing into an element and hitting a button. So you see this type into this test right here, type. I'll go through the steps, but this is where you literally type and send text into a form field. And then, we entered the fake email right here. If we watch it again.
Yeah.
See, I'm not
sure. I guess my question was going to be, so you have your, you started this NPM server, right? And
yeah.
I guess you'll go into how we would do that with our production code as well.
Right.
Also, one last question: Can you use Cypress to test a like a live site? Like if I want to go to Google and test something.
Right. That's exactly what we just watched. So here, remember, yeah. I have two sites. This one is my local host, and this is. See this I've used Heroku. I took this same site locally and I deployed it on Heroku. Like here, I'll put this link in the chat, and I think I sent it in the thing here. You can click that, and that's a live site. So the way you switch this, the Cypress has environment files. I was going to go through the whole folder structure, but you can see here I've got localhost 8080. So if I do npm cr open, like in the first, I'm at file, I've changed my host. Now we're back to, remember before I was on this, this infinite depths at Heroku app. That was actually a deployed one. That was actually running on a deployed site. And then here's my local. So now I changed this cypress.json file, and I can go over the whole project structure in a second. And then I'm going to go to this, and I'm going to run this action spec. This is like a test file. So here we're just running that one file, and when you watch it, it'll show the URL right here, not up here. That's one thing that can be, it actually opens the browser and runs it. So this is the main browser. This is Chrome, but then this is taking over and making a UI in Chrome. And you can see this localhost 8080 right here. That's what it's actually running on. So if we go and change that host URL, it'll go to infinite, or we can type google.com in there and it'll open. You can see it's running these exact same tests again. You can do it with environment files, or you can do it with environment variables too. But does that make sense, Jeff, right there? That's how that works?
Oh, yeah. But I guess what was confusing is because before you started this, you said start your app with, I don't know if it was npm start or whatever.
Well, right. So that I was just, yeah, that's what this local host is. That's this project.
Okay.
This that's this GitHub project right here that
Gotcha.
I forked from Cypress's example, because it's got a whole bunch of other stuff that if you want to show it in CI, it had all sorts of other things. I just deleted a bunch, and I also, it by default doesn't let you change the URL. So like right now, if I want to type in google.com and run this is what'll happen. I'll stop and then restart this. And this will actually try and run those tests, and then they'll fail because it's google.com and they're not the same. When it opens in a second. Okie dokie, here we go. So you can see, I even get an error. See, I'm trying to visit, I changed my root, my host name, http google.com, and it failed because there is no google.com commands, right? So that's how you switch, one of the ways you can switch your URL. Does that make sense, Jeff?
Yeah, I get it.
Okay, so we'll stop that. Let me just fix that. Okay, so now, oops. And it also nicely auto restarts if you change any of your files. And you have this little runner window. If you change any of your test files, and you're running, it'll auto restart. So I'll get this actions one going. And now here on the right-hand side, let's adjust these. It's hard doing multi-window stuff on a Zoom. Well, here's this action spec. This is the actual file. This is the test file that I'm running over here instead of all these 10 ones, right? So you can see it's, now say maybe I wanna make this fake2 email. I'm gonna enter fake2 and see, and you see it actually went and auto restarted, and now this is gonna fail because in this test I'm saying type fake2 email should have value fake email, and it just failed, right? And you can see it running. So it's a really handy thing to keep running. Unlike Protractor, those other ones, you have to stop and start. And so if I want to fix that, I'll just change that text. It's saved, and then you can see it even auto restarted it to fix it. So it makes it super easy and fast to write. These Protractor ones were so long. So I'll stop that for a sec. And let's go back to here. So here I'll just go over some of the basic code. If anyone's written Mocha or anything, this is mostly it. You have a context, that's like a describer, it doesn't quite do anything. And then, oh, can everyone see my the screen?
Yes.
I'm good.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Great. So a context is just like a describer, a wrapper, and then it is basically your like test statement, should test stuff. CY you'll see everywhere. That's just like the Cypress object in your test to do all the commands. They're all CY dot something, CY dot this. And this is just an example test. It's saying visit this URL, and then CY contains one of the main selectors of HTML is you can do it contains, which just means ignore all this, the HTML and the CSS, just get whatever has this inner text. So say you have a button with about in it. This will get that. It doesn't matter what the class idea is, which if your stuff's got unique tests, you can use that and it saves a lot of time. Then we're saying CY contains type should exist, CY contains about should exist, click it, you just chain these. And then you can say CY get gets your actual HTML regardless of what's inside of it. So say you want to check what the content of a heading 1 tag, or you know, this statement is just saying there should be no heading 1 tag. You just chain all these together. You know, should exist, should not exist. This is all basically just Mocha. Here we're saying CY get an A tag, and you want to say it should contain the word about, and it should also contain the thing help, and it should have a length of 2. So that's like your basic.
Lee, can I ask you one question?
Yeah.
You got cy.contain and then click. Can you do a dot after click and do another contain and then dot another contain rather than putting cy on the next line?
I don't think so. Some of these, like the CY get and contains, I think have to chain right off the, because you're picking an element, like you're saying CY get the about element and click that.
Yeah.
You can chain contains, I think, and shoulds. That syntax has changed the last few months, but I found it was better to keep it simpler because you want to click one out, like say you want to click a thing and make sure you get to a page, then you can verify you're on that page. And then if you still want to check things on that page or that view, then you could do another get or like a different test even. We can look at some of their examples. Now also what we're showing here is you can get, here's a context, you can do before each test. Like this is where you're mocking, say you don't want to run on your live test, you can, Cypress calls them fixtures. This is just a data.json file. And what a route does is it mocks a route. So say your Angular app calls something /API/users data, and you want to intercept that in the browser. This is where you define a CY route. If you're saying if the browser does a get call to this route, you're going to return this data file from up here before each test, the CY server, and you can have this run for a couple tests or change it, or maybe you want to change data, but this is how you'd mock routes. You know, so here's how you're doing that. You set it all up in your before, here's your test, you go to this href, and you want to make sure it contains profile, or here you want to get a row and have it have a length greater than 10 from this mock data. That's how you would mock some API calls. And remember, you have 2 ways to do it. You can run your GUI, which is what we've seen so far. That's where you have your time travel. You can go back in time. And then you can choose which test files to run. And then you can also, the tests don't reload the page unless you specifically instruct them to. Now, one thing is different in headless mode, which you run in CI, by default, it reloads some of the pages in between, and it always just runs your whole suite unless you specify it. That's some of the differences with the GUI and the headless mode. One thing that can be really tricky is just if you use CSS and your names are uppercases, it can throw things off, you know, or dashes. So, you know, your test can fail if you write a class with a capital in it. Just make sure you write exactly what it is. If you're using mock data, make sure it's there. And in general, I found using the smallest CSS selector tag is easier. You know, you can right click on an HTML and get the selector text, but it can generally lead to quite long selectors. You generally don't need those. Great. Let's go back to over here, and I'll show you some other things with this. So here's our, you know, our thing running. Now, one thing you can do too is, let's say you're writing these tests and you want to do something about this little field right here. This is a very handy thing called the selector playground. I'm going to click this, and you can see when I hover over, it gives me the CSS selector, which is very handy. Otherwise, you have to do your inspector and dig through the code. You can still do it that way. And you can see up here, excuse me, what it's even done is it's written out the command you would use to get it. So right now I can print this out to the console. Let's get the inspector open. These are just some of the handy tools that are unique to Cypress. Everyone knows our inspector console. So you can see we have, this is your normal console, and here, there we go. When I've used, we'll do this again. We'll get the email address again. And if I click this little button, you can see the command CYGET email with CSS ID email 1. It found one element and it yielded, this is the actual element, and we're hovering it over here. So very handy to just go through and write your tests or find things. And then you can also use this little thing here to copy it to the clipboard, and you can paste that into your test or whatever. And you can switch this to a contains, and you can see CY contains hello world. It's found 0, right? But maybe I change that to email, and you can see it's found one thing over here. You'd think it would have found this one too. What do we got? Action email. So it's got one in there. I wonder what happens if we change this to lowercase email. Yep, well, something's off. I thought we would have found this right here. But let's get that. And let's print that to the console. So, okay, something's slightly off there. I don't know what's up with that. You can see this is our general tools you can use to help write your tests. And then I'll walk through here a little bit of the project structure. And you can do this on any project, but it works really well with your JavaScript and your front-end ones. Whenever you do a normal install, like in your package.json, and you install, if you do an install Cypress, npm i -- save Cypress, it'll make a Cypress folder for you automatically, and it'll actually dump in a lot of example tests. Even though they may not run your thing, they have the files there, and they're all in the integration folder. And you can change all this if you want, but it has a nice consistent thing, and if you stick with it, it makes it really easy. Fixtures are where you use things to mock your routes that you're stubbing. You can do other helper files if you need to. There's like some commands. You can add certain ones. These are all the defaults. I won't get to, that's more advanced. I don't think we have time for that today. But this is basically where you'll have a Cypress folder and then your integration tests. And that's where you'll have these actual files where you write your commands. And these are all just in normal JavaScript. There's a whole bunch here. And then how you usually run these is from your package.json. Even though you can do it all from the terminal, it can be nice to have some options set up. And that's where you usually define a package.json script. So for example, what I was doing, what you saw is I would do npm run cy open. And that is the same as typing the Cypress open command in the terminal. And sometimes you want to pass different features, like you want to record things. You can use this -- record, Cypress run. It may have caches, your version, and these things can help in your CI environment. And here's where they have, run CI Windows to test on a Windows machine, to test on a Linux machine. So you can generally just define your different types of scripts with what you want to do. So here we go. I'll show you the headless version. I'll stop the runner and I'll do npm run cy run, which is just doing, it's just going to essentially running Cypress run in the terminal. And this will output everything. And this is how you do it in Jenkins or Circle or whatever, but you can't have the option to choose which tests. You just run the whole lot. Or you need to specify parameters. It'll take a second to get going. And you can see it's starting with that first actions file. You can change the format of this too if you need to, but this is just one of the defaults. It just does a checkbox for which its statement is running. And you can see even by default, it does recording videos locally. I'll show you where these show up in a second. Okay, see it. You can see now it made a video, and now here it's got Cypress videos examples. And I do believe in my editor right now, I just have the video folders get ignored because you generally don't want to check those in. But if I go, this is just the view of, this is get ignored. You can say here today, 2:26, I just made this video, and this is actually a video recording of the actual test, which can really help if you need to debug your Jenkins or Circle, then you have it save the test, and you can even do things like have it post back to a Slack channel and upload the video of where it failed. So say you're running it on a monitor or something, or you can see what's failed in your CI, which really helps to debug it, which was always one of the very time-consuming, troubling things about Protractor and the other ones. It was a rigmarole to set up any video recording, but this has it right out of the box. Great. And this is still running. I'll turn this off because it'll take a few minutes to run. But so those are the two ways to run Cypress. Let's go back to my slides. A few of the gotchas that may not be obvious is that cookies, when you do API calls or set them for like your login or your authentication, by default, it automatically clears them. But you can say persist it. Another thing, if you want to speed up your test, you can just persist your cookies. But strangely, local session storage and session storage are maintained between, but you can reverse that. Those are just some of the defaults that weren't obvious. Another thing is, out of the box, at least last I checked, you can't stub ES6 fetch calls, but you can stub XHTML requests, your normal ones. But if anyone uses the new ES6 fetch that's built in the browser, it couldn't stub those yet. And the same with multi-window support. I worked on one large application where it actually opened, it was an internal application, opened different windows and those windows talked. You can't open new windows or tabs and test it. There were ways to do that with Protractor, but you can't do that with this yet. And even though this is way better than Cypress, excuse me, there's still some issues where it's just really funky to get the selectors and have some inconsistent errors, but it's still 95% better than what Protractor was. So you may still get into some weird issues like you did with Protractor, but it's still almost 100 times better. And here's just a link to some of the references and trade-offs. These are some future features, and this may or may, they just did a major release, like I think a month or so ago. I haven't been able to check for all these. I've done this talk at least once a year the last 2 or 3 years. So I checked a few of these, but as far as I can tell now, there's still no hover command. There actually was in Protractor, I believe. There's no tab command to like tab through your forms or whatever. There's no native or mobile event support. Testing file uploads, like say you want to test a site that uploads an Excel spreadsheet or a photo, it's not, I've heard of people doing it, but it's not built in. It wasn't easy to test a file upload and make sure it got there to eject your file. The same with downloads. Iframes, if you need to test an iframe within your application, you can do it, but it's pretty hacky. And sorry, this one, what did I go? I didn't mean to do that. Right now, it runs fully in Chrome, and Electron is just a subset of Chrome. You can do Firefox and Edge in betas. So you can do those right now. And again, here's the route doesn't work on fetch, but there are some workarounds. So those are some of the hangups. Okay, and I already did the demo. Sorry, I did it slightly out of order. You can do reports. You can choose your report. It's got a JSON reporter out of the box. You can also install any Mocha reporter you want. You can use. There's like 20 for Mocha. Let's go back to here quick. I think I had this is just the Cypress documentation, which is also very good. Again, you could spend hours on this, but for reporters, there's lots of options. Like depending on what Jenkins or Circle or whatever, you may want JUnit, and Circle JUnit acts really well. If you do a JUnit report in Circle CI, it actually formats it, makes it really pretty for you. But you can do custom reporters. You can write your own, all depending on what you need to do. You can have multiple ones. Again, it all depends on your project and what you like to do. And then also, I don't have it set up for this, but Cypress also has a full dashboard. You can have it save and upload. Say you don't want to save your videos of your tests in Circle or Jenkins. You can log in and you can have it run and saved inside a a Cypress account. So there's tons of options, but usually to get a certain amount, you need to have it paid and you need to have a key in. So again, that's just an option for people to have. I always preferred to have it in my own Circle or Jenkins to save. So let's see. I think that's the general things, and we've gone about an hour now. I'll do a quick wrap up, and then we can ask questions or anything. And this is where I do like the shameless self promotion. My name's Lee, and I have my own agency as a side. I usually just work full time for companies like Dish or Aetna or DaVita Kidney Care, but I do these little talks and things for the local Angular meetups. Now for Tom's meetup. And some other ones, and it's great. I'll hopefully do more, but stuff I do is obviously I can just work in code and consult on projects, offer a bit of training like this. I'm starting to do this Thursday afternoon at 1:30 Denver time. I'm scheduling a talk every week for at least the next 2 or 3 weeks. There's some more. This is a link to my LinkedIn company, consulting companies thing. I'm on Facebook. This is the website. I've got a GitHub page, and this is my personal on LinkedIn. And everyone, I did try to send out an email, and also in Tom's meetup, I tried to paste all these links. So if anyone didn't find those, let me know, because I thought people might want to see the slides, and I had the links where they should be in, some of these other slides.